hotter the conflict, the greater the triumph.
A fiercest serpent may be overcome by a swarm of ants.
Lead me, follow me, or get out of my way. Age wrinkles the body, quitting wrinkles the soul.
Battle buddies.
Battle buddies.
Golden brown. Na, 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 na. Na, 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 na. Golden brown.
That sounds like the beginning of the Nature Boy. There was a boy.
It's a song in that movie that you and I like a lot, that Away We Go movie.
I love Away We Go.
Yeah, me too. I adore that movie. It made me excited for marriage.
It did.
Yeah.
I actually was thinking about that movie today. Do you promise that her problems will be your problems? When they're sitting on the trampoline, and like my kid was saying something stupid, and I was like, your problems are my problems.
Yep.
What's your problem?
If you're a bird, I'm a bird.
You're a bird, I'm a bird.
Yeah, same movie, right? Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming out. We're a podcast called Battle Buddies from Solano County. We appreciate you for being here. And this episode
Sucks.
Stop what you're doing right now. Hold up your drink, Kevin. Show. Okay, so listen, this is not a normal thing for Kevin. He's drank a couple times on this show, but today I'm going to say, like, unless, of course, you're not trying to drink, myself included.
You don't have to drink.
No. You don't have to. But if you do, this is the moment where you should absolutely pour yourself a drink.
This is a heavyweight.
Yeah, dude. It's not. This is going to be a rough episode.
We sent a lot of texts back and forth during this production.
Yeah, it was actually it's really funny. Cause
a lot of which we'll come to later. Fuck Switzerland?
Question mark? Dude, yeah.
And then talking to everyone I know, like, what do you think about Switzerland and why do you not know about them?
And then your wife says, neutral, right?
Yeah.
No, not neutral. We're going to get into that. But yeah, so welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't done so, open up your phone, rate and review our show. That would be very helpful. Other than that, let's fucking go. Now, I believe where we left off with Kevin was we were 3 days away from D-Day.
Yeah, D-Day was like just happening.
D-Day was just happening.
They were spouting out all those lies, right? I think it was Eisenhower. No, it wasn't Eisenhower. Who was the...
Is it George Marshall?
I don't remember. One of those fuckers were like, if you see any airplanes, it's definitely American. And then the whole time they're like, I hope no Luftwaffe show up.
Okay. So... we are now fast forwarding to 3 days after D-Day. Okay. All right. So 3 days after the Allied forces landed in Normandy, General Hap Arnold and General George Marshall met with the other leaders of the Great Alliance to figure out exactly how the American Air Force could help with the liberation of Western Europe. Upon landing in Normandy, Hap Arnold was notified by intelligence officials that the German Air Force, referred to as the Luftwaffe, officially had a lack of men, airplanes, morale, and training. This was the moment that the American Air Forces was waiting for. They could finally drop bombs on oil refineries and ammunition factories without being hit hard by German airplanes in their airspace. You can go to the next one as well. I should have. Sorry, that's D-Day. D-Day happened.
D-Day.
Goodbye.
You already know about it.
Goodbye, D-Day. All right. This sexy son of a bitch Eisenhower had to completely have different plans that could not be budged. He had some ideas and he was like, ain't nobody gonna fucking change my mind on this. All right. So he didn't want to do strategic bombing. He wanted to provide direct air support for the ground Allied forces in Normandy. Makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah. On June 15th, 1944, Hap Arnold was going to bed in London when he heard multiple explosions go off in rapid succession. All right. This noise was the pilotless rocket or drone known as the V-1 or Vengeance 1. It was called the Vengeance 1 because this was payback for the bombing of Hitler's cities. Arnold was under the impression that the location, which was the V-1 aiming, made it seem like it was trying to target the Americans' chief of staff, which is George C. Marshall. Now, the Americans would find the craters that these V-1 rockets would create, and they tried to salvage any of the parts from the vessel. Scientists would receive these parts in Dayton, Ohio, trying to reverse engineer the technology. This V-1 ultimately led to what we now know today as the cruise missile. It's a big deal. It's fucking crazy that drones existed in World War II.
It is wild. I just watched a video. Do you see the video of the Ukrainians hopping on the back of the truck?
No.
Dude, it was crazy. So these Ukrainian soldiers, someone gets hit, and they're trying to get him on the truck. So they get him on the truck, and they go, and they're fucking flying. And this like $100 drone strapped with like some C4 or some shit flies in and explodes and shoots off one of the tires from Russia as they're trying to make their getaway. And then I read that page the next day, and I was like, damn, this shit is not changed at all, except for that they're more accurate.
Correct. And people are taking off-the-shelf drones and turning them into weapons.
It's so
It's
cheap.
happening in Israel, too, in Gaza and all that.
It's crazy.
It is crazy.
And when he said revenge weapons, ladies and gentlemen, that is Hitler being a petty motherfucker.
Yeah.
Because it does not, they're so inaccurate that they can't actually hit what they want to hit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not feasible to use them right now, except for that Hitler is literally just petty that the RAF had bombed them.
Yeah.
And I think it's the payback for the bombing of Berlin because he was mad they were able to do it.
100%.
So then he just started shooting at random at London.
Yes. And Churchill has some choice words. Churchill's like, this little bitch.
Seriously.
He's like, what a little bitch.
It's the most likable Churchill is.
Yeah, it's great.
And most of London is great here. I think Oversimplified, the YouTube creator, he does a lot of good content, and he has some good stuff about like, and it's like kind of hard to show it in your classroom because he talks about how big of balls people from London have, but I keep it in because it's true. Like,
Dude,
there's no other way to say it. He's like, and the people of London just had balls of steel. Look at them. They're still sewing and drinking tea, and while they're in bunkers getting bombed by the V1s. And like, yeah, that's real. We're gonna keep that in.
You know, me and Kevin a couple episodes ago, I don't remember which episode it was, but we were talking pretty hardcore shit about the British.
Yes.
Completely changed reading this book has completely changed my mind.
Absolutely.
The British in World War II, they fucked.
They're stoic as hell.
Yeah, they get down with the get down.
And they had the better idea. The night bombings were better.
No, that's true. They were right about that.
They accepted what it was.
But
earlier.
they also accepted that we looked better in our uniforms.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
and we could
we'll
paint onto the airplanes. That's cool.
Yeah, that's hella dope. I believe at one point Miller calls it being baptized in the paintings of the. I was like, that's a cool way to put that. Now, Hap Arnold tried to convince Eisenhower that instead of targeting the runways these V1s were coming from, they should target the factories that were making these weapons. The persuasion did not work. The commanders of Operation Overlord is D-Day and, Normandy and all that, and everyone else in the intelligence field were quite worried about the possible weapons that could be attached to these V-1 rockets. They considered biological weapons, nuclear weapons, and the distance with which they could travel was also invading their thoughts. What if these V1s could reach New York? Germany would surely win the war if that were the case.
It's pretty amazing that we didn't have chemical warfare in World War II. Because we knew that the Germans had some chemical agents ready to go. And I think we had chemical agents. If we didn't have it, we had the plans ready.
I think World War I fucked some people up.
Seriously, it's good.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Because I'm just surprised Churchill didn't okay it. Because Churchill didn't seem that upset by chemical. And maybe I'm wrong.
But he was in World War I, correct?
Yes, but he seemed to enjoy World War I.
Yeah.
Most of the World War I...
He enjoyed it so much he became an alcoholic.
I find it interesting because every time I read about this stuff and realize that the Germans could put chemicals and that they had them fully formed.
We're going to talk about all that.
Yeah, okay.
Because I forget the words that... We're going to come up to that pretty soon here. The V1s were so deadly on London soil that over 1 million women and children were evacuated. This was turning into a royal pain in Churchill's ass. Churchill himself thought this rocket was a bitch move. he would be like, the rockets aren't even jeopardizing any Germans' lives. Like, that's literally what he said.
And that's why Churchill's likable there, because he's saying there's no skin in the game, which I agree with. That's my problem with drones right now.
Mm-hmm.
Go back to some of our at eases when I rant randomly about drone warfare.
It would be like watching a football game against a team who's doing steroids and one team is not.
Yeah, or like Dan Carlin talks about all the time. What if one side had like the
perfect
whatever protection, and the other side didn't?
Yeah, all the pads and stuff like that.
It'd be
boring.
People would die.
Yes,
100%. 100%. People would just be dead.
Yeah.
So Churchill's not wrong about that.
No, not at all.
Also, this is the start of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Truly.
Yeah.
Oh, the bombings and stuff right there. Yeah.
They get sent out because all the kids had to go live with random relatives in the countryside.
That's a dope connection.
Thanks.
Thank you, English teacher. Good job.
Thanks.
All right. During the month of June, an airman by the name of Fane Poole was asked to volunteer for a highly dangerous and highly classified mission. All they knew was that they'd have to drop bombs and then bail out over friendly territory. What's the incentive? This mission would count as 5 towards their required 30 missions to be done flying.
I would do it.
Yes. So if you have 5 missions and you do this next mission, that becomes 10 pretty quick.
Yep.
Okay?
And they asked, like, can we know anything else?
No.
And they're like, nope.
Dude, that's a fucking movie.
And then they said, can we have a day to think about it? Nope. You got to decide right now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the kind of person that would need to do this mission.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, I got it, dude. I don't have any kids or a wife, whatever.
I want to get home to mine.
For sure. Fane Poole was given a brief on what was to be called Operation Aphrodite. Dude, do you by any chance know what the Aphrodite, who that is, or what Aphrodite is?
Yeah, Aphrodite is the Greek god of love. Mm-hmm. I believe Aphrodite had some like ambrosia perfume, and if she put it on you, she would put it on Zeus sometimes, and then he'd have to go like have sex with his wife.
Really?
Yeah, and then while they're having sex, she could like mess with mortals.
Okay, so after we hear about what Operation Aphrodite is, let's see if there's any connection there whatsoever. Okay. The Air Force would take worn-down flying fortresses and gut the inside. All right, so think of just a shell of these planes. They'd then put a shit ton of explosives on the inside of these planes. Only 2 men needed to be on board, and they'd autopilot the planes to land and detonate on top of the V-1 launch sites. So because we didn't have our own drones, this was going to be our drone.
It's kind of genius.
It's dope.
Because America is good at what? Production.
I thought you were going to say blowing shit up.
No, we're not good at that until we get the nukes, and that's from other people. But we are good at producing.
That's true. That's why we won.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely why.
Thank you, women of America.
Seriously. That's how we beat Japan. That's how we beat Germany. 100%.
Women. Yeah, because of our women. Now, for the sake of brevity, we are going to refer to these planes as drones. Okay? So when I say drones, I'm talking about the United States drones. I'm talking about planes that we autopilot. Okay? So these drones were set to launch towards the V-1 launch pads in France on August 4th. The launch pad would open their thick doors underground once a day for 30 minutes. When they opened, the Air Force planned on dropping these drones inside the launch pad bunker doors. Sort of like a Luke Skywalker dropping the bomb into the Death Star.
It shows how creative the Germans were. And what's France called at this time? Because they have like a puppet government. They're like, it's still France, but it's not. It's Germany. It's like Vichy.
Oh, I don't know.
I think it's called Vichy France. Anyway.
Look it up, dude.
I'm pretty sure it's Vichy.
Now that we got our mission, okay? So Fane Poole, was able to get the plane off the ground with all that added weight of explosives. Once he was in the air, shit did not go right at all. The autopilot did not want to work, and the plane started to spin out of control. When Poole bailed out of the plane, he only had 500 feet to pull his chute.
Damn.
That's not a lot.
That's not
for those who are listening. Poole's drone made it to the target, but the guidance system malfunctioned, and German anti-aircraft fire was able to take care of the drone before it hit a highly valued target. On August 4th, none of the drones hit their desired target, so they tried again on August 6th with yet another failure. Dude, the amount of fucking famous names in this story.
It is wild.
I'm surprised that this wasn't a more well-known story, considering all the names in here.
Random names.
So speaking of random, we got John F. Kennedy's brother, I believe. And then Roosevelt's son, Elliot. If you're watching,
I think it's John F. Kennedy's uncle.
Oh, I'm gonna we'll find out right now.
Yeah, let me look it up.
So, no, it's John F. Kennedy's brother, Joe Kennedy. Yeah.
Did you ever read the book Naked Pictures of Famous People by Jon Stewart? He had a series of essays when we were in like high school, and
is the book with he has a black and white pictures of himself in the front?
I think so.
I've read a little bit of it. My friend had it, and we would read little excerpts.
It's so
great.
fucking fun. I read it when we were camping when I was a teenager, and the Kennedy story, because I didn't understand Kennedy stuff at all, and it really helped me. It was my first experience with Kennedy lore, and it was just about how many kids they had versus how many died at every stage of their day. So they went boating, and then they're like, tragically, 3 Kennedys died. But don't worry, because X and Y women gave birth to 5 more, so it was a net positive. Bro, so everyone's positive about this.
Why is the Kennedy family cursed?
I don't know. Well, they're so fertile too.
Dude, I recently turned in my my ballot for the primaries. I put it felt so cool to write in Kennedy for the fucking, I just felt cool. I know I'm not supposed to do that, but it's the primary, so who gives a fuck?
Doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I say. So I was like, I want to vote. I want to say in my lifetime that I voted for a Kennedy. Like, that feels cool to me.
Cool.
All right. I feel like you should be more impressed by that. That's okay. All right. Here we go. We're on August 12th. The Navy tried their hand at hitting the target since they had experience with this technology in the Pacific Theater. John F. Kennedy's brother, Joe Kennedy, to the left right there, was a Navy pilot who decided to roll the dice. Flying above Joe would be Franklin Delano Roosevelt's son, Elliot Roosevelt.
Yeah, that's wild.
The famous connections of these men are insane. Now, minutes into the flight, Roosevelt heard 2 explosions. Kennedy and his co-pilot were blown to bits, and their bodies were never recovered. Would you like to add some type of Kennedy airplane joke here? The jokes just write themselves. I don't even know how to. There's just so much.
It's okay because as he exploded, some of his seed sprouted throughout the land, and 3 new Kennedys sprouted up.
Yeah, Kennedys are like when you cut the head off two.
Yeah, it's a Hydra.
Yeah, there you go, a Hydra for sure.
Damn, the Kennedy lore should become Hydra lore. I like that.
Shortly after the failed drone missions during Operation Aphrodite, some ground intelligence officials raided these bunkers with the so-called V-1 rockets. The bunkers were filled with rats and trash. The Germans had created decoys, and the Americans fell for these decoys, sacrificing precious life in the process.
Yep.
It's fucking depressing.
Horrible.
Now, ground forces would finally finish the job that the Army Air Corps could not. Infantry was able to finally destroy the bunkers housing some of the V-1 rocket drones. London would be forever grateful. So, those covert operations that we just found out about, I mean, I don't even know if they're covert, but land forces were able to do that. Let's circle that back when we talk about Auschwitz. Okay. Operation Cobra. Now, the 8th Air Force would finally gain some morale-boosting victories in the decisive 80-day Battle of Normandy. One day, Kevin and I will cover this 80-day battle, but for right now, we have to sort of gloss over it and cover what the 8th Air Force did. Operation Cobra took place 7 weeks after D-Day. The whole idea here was to take advantage of the Germans being distracted by both the Canadians and British forces. In short, the 8th Air Force bombed the ever-living shit out of the German defensive forces. The bombings created holes for the Allied forces to be able to move freely into enemy territory. These bombing campaigns supported the ground forces so successfully that it 100% contributed to the victory and liberation of France.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So it was called Vichy France.
Okay.
That's when Nazis took it over, and they still called
They named it Vichy France like the Germans did?
Yeah, that way it could still sound like France.
Oh,
so
gross.
it's like, look, France even joined us, but it's just a Nazi in charge of it.
So it was like a propaganda bullshit.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. After the Allied forces liberated France, it was officially time to fuck up Germany. How would we do that? We would aim for their oil. Without oil, Germany wouldn't stand a chance.
I can't believe how much synthetic oil Germany produced.
I didn't even know that you could do,
right? Like, that's on the table in 1945?
Dude, Kevin, knowing what we're learning about with technology in World War II, we sit here and we're like, oh my God, technology has come so far with our cell phones. But it's like, has it?
Has it?
You know what I'm saying?
When
drones existed. I just told you guys drones existed.
Drones existed fine. They did fine.
Yeah.
They could hit London.
Yes.
And they had synthetic oil.
They had synthetic oil. They had jets. Like, what? Somebody needs to call us or email us and tell us some really cool conspiracy theories about Nazis and aliens.
Ooh, I do like that.
Yeah, dude, aliens are great. Anytime we can get aliens involved, I'm on board.
To be clear, I do not like the Nazis.
No.
Anti-Nazis. Pro-aliens.
Yes, absolutely. 100%.
Also, Von Braun sucks.
Can we make a movie about Nazi aliens?
Have they not made Nazi aliens?
Battle Buddies presents Nazi aliens.
This could be because we want to release a board game at some point, and so we'll do like a military
Did you say
campaign.
want?
Need to.
We will.
Yeah, we will, and we will have to do Nazis versus aliens.
I'm so excited about that. Alrighty, the oil war. Let's get into it. Eisenhower would give Spatz permission to bomb oil refinery targets in Germany, but some intelligence came in with a juicy target that would be a devastating blow to Germany if pulled off successfully. It's important to note here that Germany was a chemical empire built on coal, air, and water. When the Americans hit the hydrogen plants, they were also knocking out 63% of Germany's nitrogen, 40% of its methanol, and 65% of its rubber. Added bonuses all throughout the oil campaign. Like, it's just crazy, all the things that they were able to hit. Now, if you are like me and you are watching the show and you see those scenes where they're flying through the air and bombs are exploding around them and you're wondering, how accurate is this shit?
Right.
The answer is that it isn't.
It is not.
The most damage it did was psychological, making the men who were flying the planes nervous as all get out. Other than that, the Germans were wasting a shit ton of ammo and resources firing those things into the air. And it was a lot.
What was it? It was like 6,000 per hit or something.
It's insane. Yeah, it's
it was
insane.
Crazy. It would hit them.
So that's not to say that the anti-aircraft didn't work.
Right.
But
the cost benefit.
Exactly. Most of the ammunition out of the stuff that did hit would harmlessly explode in the air. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because he did a good job. Miller does a good job in these two chapters. I think one part that he does a good job with this is that he says the pilots have to fly still. They cannot move because they have to stay in formation. It's the only way through this part of the strategy, the tactic. And so that is the part that weighs on you, because when you see things exploding around you, you want to take evasive action. Yes. It's just a natural part of being human.
Exactly.
Dodge and dip and dive. And they can't. They got to fly right through it. Mm-hmm. That sucks.
It does suck. Yeah. All right. Let's get our famous 1,000-yard stare up there.
Damn.
Now, so these men who were, considering the psychological trauma that goes with watching bombs go off around you, these men became desensitized to everything. Visitors would come on the base and see shells of men walking around. One person witnessed these men playing a volleyball game, and they played in silence. There was no cheering, no motivation, just quiet zombies going through the motions. I put that in there because that's just super interesting.
Yeah, it's Top Gun, but there's no song and there's no laughing.
Yeah, it's very quiet. Like, somebody who watched this volleyball game was like, holy shit, these are different people.
It reminds me too, when that desensitized bit reminds me of our last combat veteran that we had.
Ron?
Yes. Mm-hmm. When, sorry, I forget how much of his name we were allowed to say. when he talked about that pull towards becoming desensitized, and it really struck a chord with me of how universal that feeling must be, that in World War II, they're having the exact same feelings that he had in 2010.
Yeah.
Things have not changed. You know, that there's a part of the human condition that to accept warfare and life and death as a daily, reality, you're going to be pulled towards becoming desensitized.
Yes.
And these guys...
a coping mechanism.
It is. And these guys had to accept it, whereas he was able to push back against it, it feels like.
Well, he was yeah, go listen to that episode. I don't want to speak for him.
That is a fantastic... I get goosebumps just thinking about that episode. He did such a good job just
Go
explaining.
listen to our original Stryker Brigade episode with Ron. It's fucking incredible.
It's episode 48.
Go listen to episode 48. Hi, Ron.
Yeah, thank you, Ron.
Alrighty. So, what came of the oil campaign? Germany had an entire force dedicated to the rebuilding of bombed oil refineries. Simply aiming for the oil refineries itself was not working at all. So, American forces finally started aiming for gas compressors and gas refineries, the electrical grid powering the oil refineries, and lastly, water mains leading to the refineries.
Which was much smarter.
Way smarter.
We're glossing over a lot. There was a lot of failed battles because they would just send up... All right, we used the Norden bomb site in daytime, and what did the Germans do? They used a novel, nuanced approach, which was, let's just light really thick smoke fires near our oil refineries so that you don't know where the refinery is. And guess what? It worked really well.
Yeah, Miller does a really cool job when he's talking about them aiming for all the different things. He's like, they were getting the lungs of the, like, it's he does a really cool job giving you like a visual of what aiming for the subsidiaries of the oil refineries did.
Well, because we rely on that, right? So like Martinez, when Shell owned Martinez refinery, which they don't anymore, like my dad ended up working for a catalyst plant in Azusa in Southern California that would build the catalyst that would then allow the construction of oil.
Interesting.
From crude oil and gasoline. So it's very much a thing. And Shell Oil plays a big part in this story, which is just random.
So this strategy did ultimately stop the oil production in Germany for good.
Yes, absolutely.
It stopped it. Okay. So
this is the part.
This is where things get...
I am so excited for Spencer's take on this. This is listeners, like when reading this part, I was like, I'm so mad I'm not the one writing the script for this. And then I was like, wait, I don't have to write the script for this. I can just talk about it and listen about it. That sounds great because this part's hard.
Okay, so listeners, Kevin and I had a week off last week from work, and my son was having a play date, so I was like, when we do these, I go back and forth between listening on Audible, being on my laptop, being on my Kindle, and I'm constantly going in between 3 devices because we read a shit ton.
Yes.
And so we had our car in the shop, and I'm listening to what you guys are about to listen to, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go walk to get my vehicle from the shop. And I walked in the rain listening to this portion of the book. Because in my mind, I was like, these men went through so much shit that I can walk in the fucking rain to get my car.
Sure.
So I would listen to this next part. Just imagine me walking in like my town, pouring rain. And I was just like, it just really helped with the vibe.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
You go to Cherry Pit?
Past it. I walked past it.
Where did you go to get your car worked on?
Oh, The Good Guys.
The Good Guys?
That's the place.
Okay.
Yes. Shout out to Abe at The Good Guys. Okie doke. So trigger warning, you guys. This next bit there's going to be talks of like rape and pretty horrendous shit. So if you don't want to hear that, skip ahead.
And we're not even at the bad stuff yet.
Nope, we're not.
This is still G-rated.
I'm just letting you know that shit's about to get really depressing.
We were at G, now we're at PG-13, but we're nowhere near the R rating that comes later.
The warning has been made.
Yeah, we already did it. Heavy hitter.
Okie doke. The author of The Masters of the Air, Donald L. Miller, takes this part of the book to talk about the Allied forces contemplating the bombing of Auschwitz.
This is the best writing Miller does.
It is. It's really good. And luckily, because Kevin and I read this book for you, I get to summarize this long portion of the book in the matter of a couple sentences. You're welcome. Basically, the Allied forces were extremely worried about bombing the innocent Jews living in Germany. That was a hard pill to swallow, considering the already harsh environments for the Jews. Another stark reality is that the Allied forces were more worried about saving Russia more than they were about saving Jews. Sad, but true. All right, well, let's open up the pit. Where was your... you, listener. I want the listener to think about this. Like, how would you feel as a general or the American government about the idea of bombing Auschwitz, knowing that you would be killing some innocent people in the process, but you would also be getting rid of these war crimes.
Right. Crematoriums.
Yeah.
Gas chambers. Brutal stuff.
It's awful.
And what you're talking about, the Russia... So if you don't know a lot of Russian history is hilariously summarized by, and then it got worse. Because every part of Russian history, you can just end with, and then it got worse, and then you tell the next part of the story. You're like, holy shit, and then it got worse, and then you're like, holy fuck. And you can just go through all of Russian modern history like that, and you're like, damn, it does not get better. But they had a bunch of pogroms, which are essentially just genocides and holocausts that they committed, so they weren't that interested in it. But then when we're talking about bombing Auschwitz...
Yeah. I feel like Kevin, you were very pro bombing Auschwitz.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. Reading this was very illuminating to me because I never realized that this was on the table. I never knew this was on the table. I never knew there's a lot of misdirection and a lot of gray area and purposefully confusing what we knew and what we didn't know. And I've listened to a lot of different sources because I teach the Holocaust every year, and I try to dive into it every year as deep as I can. And I've come to the conclusion that I don't fucking know how much we knew. I know we knew more than we say we knew, in terms of leaders. Senators knew more than what we say they knew. And we denied millions of Jews from coming over, essentially, because we only let a couple thousand come over.
I think it's something was it millions?
Well, I don't know, because there's how many millions died?
I know.
How many did we let over? We let over a couple thousand, maybe.
Yeah.
Because we couldn't be bothered by it, or we said it was too confusing or too complicated. We had some bullshit excuse, and so we obviously knew more than we said we did, and then we try to back up, and that becomes this whole propaganda machine. And I didn't realize that this was on the table, that we knew enough to know that there, at least by the early 1945s, late 1944s, there's a place called Auschwitz, and it's not fucking okay.
Dude, so, isn't this interesting, listeners, that Kevin, who is doing a Holocaust unit for his students right now in middle school, did not know this.
I didn't know this.
Neither did I.
And I appreciate Miller to the nth degree here, because I think I'm with Miller. I don't think there's a right choice.
No, of course not.
Yeah. Should you bomb Auschwitz or not? I think it's a personal choice, based on the data that you have available. My problem is that I don't know what data they have available, right? In order to judge their decision, right? How much did they know? How much did they not know? We don't know, because it's purposefully being, I don't even know how to say it correctly. It's purposefully being confused or glossed over or propagandized, I guess. So what do we do with since we don't know that, what we do know is that they didn't have a real conversation about it.
Yeah.
And that's the fucked up part. They should have had a real conversation where they planned it. And I was telling Spencer how I saw this moment play out is just like how I would play it out in my classroom. So the way I play it out in my classroom is I'd walk up to my principal and be like, hey, I got a parent saying we should write 2 more essays. Should we write 2 more essays? And my principal went, no, fuck that. Because I obviously portrayed it with my rhetoric in a way that's I'm not for this.
Right.
This is dumb. Let's push this past us.
Right.
And that's how Miller portrays this moment is, right or wrong, they didn't have the conversation correctly. And that's the part we should judge.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Like, why do you think that we don't know about this? Simply because of that? There was no conversation about it?
I think they didn't have the right conversation. And then after, when they fully liberated and they're like, oh, shit, we're going to talk about this forever.
It's going to be in the history books.
This is going to be in the history books.
There's going to be whole units about it in English class.
Exactly. And I think they're like, well, let's double down on not talking about it.
Yeah. So where my mind goes with, we just learned in this episode about how we had ground forces go in and, try to get rid of these V1 rockets. I would have tried to do something similar.
Yeah.
Like, hey, let's send in the specialist of forces that we have and get rid of these fucking things.
Well, I was just thinking too, the other player in this conflict, when you think about it this way, is Switzerland. And that may not be really apparent right away, but I've read enough Holocaust literature now to know that the Swiss were doing the checks on the concentration camps.
Geneva Convention.
Because of the Geneva Convention and the Red Cross.
Dude, how come Churchill didn't bomb any of the...
And I think it's because of the neutrality and weirdness and the political nonsense that has to do with Switzerland.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this is my theory. Unfortunately, it seems like the United States was going to war with Germany because of Hitler, not because of the Jews.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
100%.
The Jews thing just gave us more kindling for the fire.
It made it more pure. It made it more correct.
It gave us more justification.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's also propaganda.
Yeah. 100%. Which is like correct propaganda. Like that's the way that I would use it as if I was a leader.
No, it's the right side of history for sure. It's just, this is a really interesting
Because what if
question.
I've been reading Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, and
nice.
Hitler is not Marcus Aurelius, whereas Marcus Aurelius probably committed similar crimes to Hitler.
For sure.
And I think if Hitler was Marcus Aurelius, it would be a lot harder to like get everyone in the world to want to kill him, because Marcus Aurelius is like, just be good to everybody.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
And do what you need to do, but just know that we're all going to die anyway.
Yes, sir.
And so that's just very different from Hitler.
Yeah, that's endearing.
Yeah, I love Marcus Aurelius, even though he committed war crimes.
Yeah. So anyway, interesting thing to talk about. Now that you guys know that.
Yeah, to summarize what we're talking about here, they technically didn't have they knew that they could bomb Auschwitz and concentration camps. Mm-hmm. So the Americans knew that they should bomb crematoriums. They say crematoriums. And they send these stupid half-assed like messages up the ranks to like Spatz and Arnold, and they're like, no, because it's worded so poorly. Obviously, no, we're not going to do that. And Miller's condemning them because he's saying they didn't have the real conversation. They didn't really write it out. They didn't have the war council where you're saying, with all these economists that we have, right? We have like IBM, right? Like we have all these big people. Also, IBM is like legit in these two chapters. I fucking like, I want to start working for IBM, I guess. Because like they're personally financing like a lot of this shit. And they didn't have the conversation about like what's the cost benefit, like what's the morality of bombing a concentration camp, potentially killing Jews right now to stop more Jews from dying later.
Right. And that's the whole train analogy.
Yeah, the trolley problem. Yeah. The trolley problem is if you have a trolley and it can go in one of two directions. One direction kills, two people, and maybe one of those two people, or it can go the other direction and kill 15 people. You don't know any of them. What's the correct choice?
Right.
And the answer is there's no correct choice.
There isn't. Yeah, it's a quandary.
Yeah.
So,
what do you think, listener? This is going to be I'm going to stick on this. I'm literally going to be asking all my 8th graders this
Hit us
this
up.
Week.
It is fascinating to think about. So,
what would you do? I know that you said special forces. Let's say special forces wasn't an option. Let's say it's bomb or not bomb.
Dude, unfortunately, as like thinking diplomatically, I just don't see forgiveness of bombing Jews.
So you're thinking posterity.
But it's also fucked up because they're bombing Germany like as civilians.
Yeah.
So
we kill lots of Swiss accidentally too, which is the only thing that really.
No, that's not. That's.
It happens.
It turns out that there's like leverage for that.
There is.
So
I think
I don't know, man. If I'm some general ass person, I'm thinking let's not bomb it, but let's not rule it out.
Okay,
that's what I'm gonna say.
I would
let's see how long this war goes. Like if you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like at this moment,
let's
it's not
leave
yet.
it up for discussion.
I think if anyone showed me the figures of how many people were dying in there, and I was the general, because in my mind, especially after reading Marcus Aurelius, he does such a good job of showing like you got to be the devil when you're in charge, and you got to make the bad choice. And I think the bad choice is fucking bomb the shit out of that, because that's the only way to stop a greater casualty. Sure, I won't be remembered correctly, but who cares? We all die anyway. It's the best choice that my soul can make.
Well, what do you think? How do you think Germany would respond to the Jews in that way, though? Like, do they be like, fuck it, just start shooting them? You know what I mean?
Because they have other means.
What if there was an adverse effect to that, of them, like...
So that's why I wish there was a conversation, because there's no data. Like, and I know they had data, and no one's going over the data.
Yeah.
It's fucked. This is a fucked up part of American history.
These are hard conversations.
And they didn't have the hard conversations. I really believe that I could accept either direction and accept, like I've been accepting of most of the bomber mafia making the wrong choice, but at least they tried to make a choice. Whereas this is they bitched out of making a choice, and I want to judge them for that.
Yeah. I will say, hindsight, it does feel good to sit in this chair and be like, oh, we Americans did not bomb a bunch of Jews.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? So
it's not a good look.
There is that.
Sure.
All right. Hit us up, folks. Let us know what you think. Genuinely want to know. So the thesis of this chapter was Germany lost World War I to the naval blockade, and Germany would be massively hit by the aerial blockade of World War II. All right, now we get to talk about Switzerland.
Fucking Switzerland, man.
Alrighty. This is if you wanted it to get lighter, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
I mean, what was your
lighter.
choice as the writer? You could have talked more about ball bearings. That came up again a lot. A lot of steel trade. I assume you're going to go over a lot of the steel trade that goes on between Switzerland and Germany.
That's it.
That's all we're going to talk about.
That's what you got me.
It's hella boring, but it is important.
All right, Kevin, can you point to the little red bloop right there on our map? Thank you. That is Lake Constance.
We just stayed in Tahoe, in Truckee, and we had a Zurich, and we had a Davos, and we had a lot of these places for different roads.
Interesting.
It is interesting.
It is, yeah, interesting.
And they had Rhineland.
With an M or N?
N.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rhineland, got you. All right, let's go to Switzerland, March 18th, 1944.
They're neutral, right?
Yeah, if you're in your car right now and you're listening to this, or if you're listening to this with like a glass of scotch by yourself, raise your hand if you think Switzerland is neutral. You're raising your hand. I see you.
Switzerland's neutral. I like their watches.
Switzerland is neutral, guys. Hey, how many arguments have you been in your fucking life where some third-party person is like, I'm going to be Switzerland about this and just not being there? You know what I'm saying? It's like, now you can be like, actually.
Well, because it's, okay, we'll come back to it.
We haven't even gotten there yet.
I know, but what neutral means.
Oh, okay, tell me.
Well, it's like neutrality means something that I didn't realize it meant, which is you are neutral only for your personal gain. And so there's a political and economic component to neutrality that I didn't fully comprehend, because when you're taught it as a kid, you're taught neutrality, I want to stay out of it. But that's not fucking true. It's I want to not get shot at, but I would still like to make as much money as possible.
I'm actually really grateful that you brought that up before we get into this.
Yeah, because this part's really confusing. I've thought a lot about this.
Yeah. Okie doke. On a hazy day, flying toward Lake Constance on the border of Germany and Switzerland, a B-24 Liberator was hit with flak and needed to make an emergency landing in neutral Switzerland. Airmen were told if they needed to, radio a local tower in Switzerland and ask for permission to land. Lieutenant George D. Telford flew out of formation telling his fellow comrades that he was going to try and land in Switzerland. The only problem was that most men who landed there never returned. Now, author Donald L. Miller uses this time in the book to discuss the philosophy and idea behind a neutral Switzerland. Miller describes this information he disseminates as the most well-kept secret of World War II.
Okay, let's repeat that, because it doesn't sound like that's a real thing, but I checked with my father-in-law, who had top secret clearance.
Yeah.
And he was a pilot.
Yeah.
And he knew nothing of this. He was utterly shocked listening to this.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. He was so pissed off listening to me tell this story at breakfast, which also is the wrong time to tell this story. But I just had to tell, because I told my wife when we were going to bed, and she's like, I don't want to hear this before we're going to bed. And I was like, okay, well, then I'll talk to your dad in the morning. And he's like, I don't want to hear this right now. I was like, okay, well, there's no good time to talk about this.
There's never a good time for this.
Yeah.
So
this is the most well-kept secret of World War II, and the reason why it's the most well-kept is because we have blood on our hands for it. Mm-hmm. Switzerland has blood on their hands for it, and everybody else has blood on their hands for it. Every leader has blood on their hands for this.
Yep.
Besides maybe Russia. Russia comes out clean. That's not a good look.
Russia has the moral high ground here.
Russia has the moral high ground. That's not a good look. Yeah. Russia in World War II has the moral high ground.
The secret that we are talking about, of course, is the secret that Switzerland was indeed not as neutral as the world currently gives it credit for.
We still... And there's been recent things, because I've been reading, I study the Holocaust with my kids. So, there is some stuff coming out about, hey, Switzerland still has, Holocaust gold.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So you learned all of this, and then this did that really provide some context?
Yes, because I've heard stories, but it's been anecdotes. I haven't seen any, I've never seen a bank statement. But I've heard that Switzerland still has a lot of Holocaust, jewelry and shit that people have deposited during that time period, and you're like, no way, or maybe a one-off. And then after this, I'm like, they fucking have gold teeth still.
I know, it's funny because they're legitimately still people think they're neutral.
The Red Cross, based off of Swiss, right?
Yes. Fuck. Okay. So Switzerland had a fascinating dichotomy that I had no knowledge of prior to reading this book. The purpose with which the author mentions this is due to the fact that emergency landing in Europe, no matter where the location was, oftentimes led to insanely dangerous outcomes. The Swiss would house the Americans if they landed in Switzerland, but they wouldn't let them fucking go. The Swiss feared if they let the Americans go, then Nazis would not view Switzerland as a neutral entity. It is important to mention here that there were a fuck ton of Nazi sympathizers in Switzerland.
Yes.
That's another way of saying that the Swiss were complicit with Nazi-occupied Europe.
Okay, just go back through the documents and go look at it. Oh, wait, you can't, because Switzerland scrubbed all of their Nazi documents. They had political parties and public agencies that had Nazi affiliations, and they scrubbed them all. The government did. The government went into their libraries and scrubbed anything related to Nazi Germany. Which is fucked up.
That's extremely fucked up.
Can you imagine if America tried to go back and scrub the fact that the KKK existed?
Dude, I swear to God. Yeah, that would be nuts,
right?
It'd
be nuts.
I guarantee
there would be a revolt.
Motherfuckers are going to listen to this episode. They're going to go tell their friends, and be like, what conspiracy theories are you talking about right now?
Right?
People aren't going to believe this shit.
And what is it all about? I mean, there's the Nazi ideology, but are you going to talk about the steel shit?
Which one? What are you talking about?
Well, so the Switzerland were selling steel because that's their big product, right? Yeah. That's what they can produce. So they would sell it to Germany for food and for airplanes. Mm-hmm. And so that's why a lot of the Luftwaffe, the airplanes, the same ones that they had, the Switzerland had. And so the Americans would see it's a Luftwaffe.
It's a Swiss person.
But it's Swiss?
Yeah.
And So Switzerland was neutral, but by neutral, what they meant is they wanted to sell steel to Germany, but they knew Germany wasn't going to win the war.
Correct.
And so then they didn't want to piss us off too bad.
Yeah. They also had fucking trains of cargo boxes filled with Jews transit through their country to get to concentration camps. Americans at the time thought that airmen would purposefully land in Switzerland to avoid combat. But stories would surface after the war as to how the living conditions were in the POW camps of Switzerland.
Dude, fuck Arnold a little bit on that whole section. Arnold is... So what Spencer's talking about there is Arnold is given one report from one dude saying, hey, like a lot of people are going over to Switzerland to escape the war. And he's like, fuck, is that true? And then he just believes it's all true. And Spats and everybody else is like, no, man, my boys are legit. They took an oath that they would violate the Geneva Convention to escape a neutral country to come back here. And that is true. They tried to escape Sweden, they tried to escape Switzerland, and they tried to escape Russia. Well, Russia would let them go most of the time. They would try to escape those places to come back because that was an oath that he took. And this is a generation that believed in that shit.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that, Kevin, because I didn't have that in my little thing here, but that's
I forgot,
important information.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really hit me that they knew they were going to violate the Geneva Convention and do it. It's fucked up that Spats asked them to take that oath to begin with. I hate him for asking guys to take that oath. And they're 17-year-old kids. Yeah. And they took the oath. And so they're like, if I was 17 and I took that oath, I'd be like, of course. Fuck, I'm going to do it. Yeah. This is what I told them I would do. And I'm a man of my word.
Right. Now, this gentleman behind me,
Quaker.
This is Dan Culler.
I love you, Culler. I hope you lived a happy life.
Well, if anybody listening has a weak stomach or has zero desire to listen to brutal details of physical abuse and rape, now is the time to skip ahead a couple minutes, and I am formally giving a trigger warning.
I'm going to try to give a timestamp here of how long to skip.
Okay. Yeah, actually.
Yeah, we'll do that.
If you don't want to hear the story about rape, go to around 1 hour and 2 minutes.
I think it is important. So I thought long and hard. I was texting Kevin after I read this, and I was genuinely thinking long and hard about adding this to the podcast. Is this important
Skipping
to
it all
hear?
Together?
Yeah, and I think it is important to share because Kevin and I have been recently talking about how important it is to understand that where there is war, there is rape.
Right. Well, it's what we've been saying. This is our new philosophy from all the studying of war. Where there is an invasion of any sort, there is X amount of looting and there is X amount of rape.
Yes.
And it is not zero.
Right.
And we should start holding everybody in leadership roles responsible to tell us how much looting and rape they're okay with.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be zero.
Right. Like, start with that.
Start with that.
So instead of being like, hey, we're thinking about invading Gaza, it's like, whoa. What you actually need to start with is how many people are statistically going to get raped if we do that.
Right. How much loot are you predicting? Because I guarantee you that somebody in the top secret world has learned how to crunch these numbers. They're not that hard to crunch. How many infantry soldiers are you leading in? How many infantry soldiers will follow the rules and not loot? That leaves you with the amount that will. How many will follow the rules and not rape people? Right. How many won't? There are complicated parts of the military. This is not one.
No. And I think we should have a new scale, a new Richter scale, or a new number, call it the POR number. Possibility of rape. The POR
what a
number.
Terrible term. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I hate it.
It's supposed to be funny, but it just really isn't.
No, but
I was trying to make it light.
This is me trying to, when my father-in-law was on the show and he's like, why haven't you guys covered the Auschwitz yet?
Because it's horrible.
Because there's just so much rape in it.
Yeah, it's not fun.
It's terrible.
Yeah. I definitely felt like Henry Zabrowski in the last podcast on the left, where I was like, my dreams were affected after reading this shit. Like I haven't watched the newest episode because of how heavy this was. I was like, I need a break. Yep. I've been getting palate cleanser books where I learn about soccer tactics.
I read Marcus Aurelius.
You read Marcus Aurelius? Yeah.
I had to reconnect.
All right. So Mr. Dan Culler behind me was put into a PW camp that was filled with Russian POWs. Now,
okay, can we back up for a second?
Sure.
So the way it works is at first you're put into like what they would publicly show, which would be like, you're in a resort.
Right.
You're in a resort, dude. It's awesome here.
So nice.
And the resort has no food, and it's rough as fuck. And they're kids. This guy is 17. He's a Quaker.
Child.
He told his mom, he made his mom sign his papers, and he came to this conclusion that he will not go to heaven for joining this war. But he's hopeful that God will understand and put him not in hell. That's where this kid's mind is at.
Yeah.
And I love him for it, because he
sure.
saw an evil, which is Hitler, which is an obvious evil. It is a clear, even for a Quaker to be like, yeah, this guy's kind of fucked up. Like, we should probably stop this guy, right?
Yeah.
And he joined the war knowing eternally that he will not get to go to heaven, which is the only thing Quakers care about. So I love him already for this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he took an oath. And he's a Quaker. He's obviously a kid of his word. And the oath was, if you get captured, you have to get away because you cost so much in training.
Right.
That's the subtext. You cost so much in training. We can't just train another guy. It costs us too much money. We got to get you back. So then he's a gunner, and so he tries to escape and then gets caught. He tries to escape, and they have to cross giant Swiss mountains.
Yeah.
And he makes it like 300 miles on foot with no... He's from like a little Midwestern town.
Yeah, he's from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, he knows nothing of like mountaineering and like surviving. And so the fact that he didn't die, I think the other two guys might have died. We don't even know what happens to them. But he makes it back, and then he gets sent to this fucking camp.
Yeah. And this story is tragic. So, although these atrocities I'm about to explain are from the Russians, it happened in a Swiss camp and could have been avoided if they upheld the Geneva Convention standards, and let alone the Red Cross could have examined these situations. Not to mention the goddamn Geneva Convention is in Switzerland.
Dude. Or, yeah, I was like, any of the things. Or just being human.
Yeah, that
after the events, he tried to talk to them. We'll go over that in a second.
Okay, so the next portion, because I didn't have any way to properly do this in my own words, I am going to literally just read from the book.
Yep.
Alrighty. This is Miller's, Miller wrote this following about Culler's experience in the Swiss POW camps.
Yay.
Quote, "What happened to me that night, and many more to follow, was the worst hell any person had to endure," Culler wrote in his searing prison memoir. A group of Russian prisoners held him down, stuffed straw in his mouth, and sodomized him repeatedly. Quote, "Coming from a small farming community, I never heard of men doing what they did. I hadn't even been with a girl, except to hold her hand and give her a light kiss on her cheek or mouth. I was bleeding from all the openings of my body, and I prayed to God to take my life from me. He was raped again the next morning and forced to have oral sex with several of his assailants, who stuck sticks in his mouth to pry it open. After being knocked unconscious, he awoke to find blood running down his throat. Too weak to move, and with his hands tied behind his back, he was thrown into the waste ditch outside the barracks. Quote, "When I finally came to my senses, I crawled from the ditch and tried to wipe myself with straw. I noticed something was hanging from my rectum and realized it was skin from the inside, and I tried to push it back in." Within days, Culler's entire body was covered with boils from the lice and rats in the feces-contaminated straw. The rapes continued and became more violent. He began to vomit blood and an unknown yellow substance, and he developed chronic bloody diarrhea. When a British sergeant major visited the camp to check on the English prisoners, Culler asked him why the Red Cross had not come to inspect this place, why he was being held without trial, and why had the American military attaché in Bern, General Legge, not been informed of his imprisonment. On a later visit, the sergeant major told Culler that he had intervened on the Americans' behalf to the British authorities in Bern, but had been told that General Legge refused to believe that the Swiss had a place like this. As I mentioned earlier, American leaders thought that the airmen were trying to get down to Switzerland to avoid combat. So when Dan told his story to his superiors, they did not believe him. That's another reason I needed to mention this. The horror and trauma this man went through needs to be recognized, and the bullshit he went through is not something that will go away from war anytime soon. At the time, American diplomats were negotiating reparation payments to the Swiss government for the accidental bombing of Swiss cities, and General Legge was still trying to close a deal with the Swiss for the reparations of the 600 or so remaining American internees. The American government wanted no negative publicity about the Swiss while these negotiations were in process. If Culler persisted in his story and went public with it, the army would declare him mentally incompetent and put him in a mental detention hospital for years. After swearing to remain silent about his captivity, standard procedure for both internees and evaders, Daniel Culler was shipped home on November 1944. When he walked into his mother's kitchen and she saw his condition, the first words out of her mouth were, "I warned you about those awful wars." And that's where Kevin will pick up next week.
So good. It's brutal. When he first went through the rapes, he tried to go to the guards, and they just told him to fuck off.
Yeah.
So then he just laid in the ground and hoped dogs would kill him. He then went to a court-martial meeting or some. It was not court-martial, but he went to like a legal proceeding. Like he tried to fight for his. The Culler story is fucked up because he actually tried to like do the right thing. So he went to the guards. The guards were like, "This is what you're here for." He went to a court. They didn't put his statement into the court proceedings, and they spoke in a different language just to like fuck with him. Mm-hmm. And then, when he finally gets out, they just tell him he can't talk about it.
Yeah,
it was like it's multiple days when he's being interrogated by the Americans. They try to poke holes in his story for days, and he's like, "Why would I make this up?" He strips naked. He literally strips naked. So he's like, "Why would I make this up? I'm covered in lesions. Like this is insane to me."
Yeah.
And he's a Quaker who has done nothing but hold the girl's hand.
Yeah.
He didn't even know that you could do that.
Yeah, it's pretty fucking depressing, dude.
Fucking crazy.
So, this is a podcast about war, dude, and
there's a part of it.
Yeah, sometimes it's like super important for this story and for listeners to understand like the fucking hell that these human beings go through. Because that's a part of it, dude.
Part of it.
Yeah. Pretty fucked up shit. So yeah, this affected my week.
Absolutely.
And I was like, God damn it. So yeah, listeners, Kevin texted me like a couple days ago. He's like, so fuck Switzerland, right? It's like, yes. 100%.
Well, it's like Sweden had it figured out.
Yeah. Sweden did have it figured out.
And Spencer's not wrong. There is the part where we, during a bombing, did bomb Switzerland on accident. And we did kill a lot of people. And that's fucked up on us, too. But it's just for political maneuvering that we hid these stories and told this guy he's going to be insane. And he's going to be, he's going to be locked away forever if he tried to come clean about this.
Yeah. This is your greatest generation trying to cover up all this shit, It's just fucking interesting, yeah. Yeah. Fuck, dude. Well, anyway, thank you for listening. If you made it this far, we fucking appreciate you. There has been hella interaction on the internet lately for us, and that's been very self-esteem raising.
Yes.
I've been hella stoked about that. Thank you from the bottom of our souls for listening. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for interacting with us on Instagram and X and all that stuff. Do you have any news or updates about things in the future coming out or anything like that?
No, I'm really excited about our next series, though.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun.
It is going to be fun.
Yeah.
That's all we do is have fun here. Unless, of course, we talk about rape. Dan Culler, bro. R.I.P.
Our two fun topics today: bombing Auschwitz and soldiers getting raped by Russians in Switzerland.
Yeah, this was not a great episode.
It wasn't light. It was great. It was great. You did a great job.
Thank you. And there was some laughs along the way. Yeah. So we did all right. But
ball bearings.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. We will see you next week, and until then, bonsai.